If a woman does a useless thing, none reproves her. If she does a harmful thing, few seeks to restrain her. But if she seeks to imitate the goddess and to encourage others, all those in authority accuse her of corruption. So it's more dangerous to teach truth than to enter a powder magazine with a lighted torch. Xiang summed up the Book of Sayings, and I apologize if I said the name wrong, which I probably did. Jaguar woman speaking like fire, with an eye of smoke and a daggered hand. She like stars, black sky obsidian, loops of light, moonlight starlight, all night long. She is the marrow of the underbrush, she is the waterfall no one has seen. She is the resting place of the sun. Extend the universe in every direction and bring her home. Jack Crimmins, Jaguar woman. Preface. Since 1973, I have been traveling to Manitoba, Canada, to see a certain Native American medicine woman named Agnes Whistling Elk. At first, I came to her as an art dealer from Los Angeles in search of a sacred marriage basket. Slowly, our relationship changed and I became this woman's apprentice. She has taught me a system of beliefs that had previously been foreign to me. Agnes stresses the dignity and value of womanhood. She has said that it had been told to her in a prophecy that I was to become a warrioress of the rainbow of black, white, red, and yellow peoples, and that one day I would become a bridge between the two distinct worlds of the primal mind and the white consciousness. During the course of my apprenticeship, I have been forced to restructure my beliefs as to who I am and what the world is. In an alien environment, I was pitted against an adept male sorcerer named Red Dog. In this dangerous struggle, I triumphed, much to my surprise. I have undergone several initiations since then, culminating with an initiation into a highly secretive shamanistic society of women known as the Sisterhood of the Shields. Agnes asked me to write about these experiences, to let the eagle fly, and to teach people in an effort to heal our sacred Mother Earth. Medicine Woman was my first attempt to do this, and Flight of the Seventh Moon was the second in a series of books about the extraordinary adventures and shamanistic teachings I have encountered. This book stressed the ancient powers of woman. This ancient knowledge has been memorized and beaten into history by powerful Native women throughout time in order to protect and preserve it for the generations that follow on this beautiful earth. Jaguar woman explores a range of movement, much as the butterfly covers this continent in its wanderings from Canada to Mexico. This book explores not only a physical change of locale, but also the process of psychic, mental, and emotional movement from one state of mind to another, and movement from one attribute of perception to another. One of the great tools of Native American tradition is the medicine wheel. This seemingly simple existential paradigm is a rich, complex, and subtle symbol of mystical and philosophical depth. Trained apprentices are taught to use the medicine wheel as a map to their innermost being. The four directions on the wheel represent categories of qualities both inner and outer. The south represents trust and innocence. The west is the home of the sacred dream, death, and rebirth. The north symbolizes wisdom and strength, and the east is illumination. The key to using the medicine wheel is movement, the way a person moves from one direction to another in the process of learning. For example, a woman living in trust and innocence in the south of the medicine wheel may progress through a series of life experiences and reach a state of wisdom and strength in the north. At this point of wisdom, she has grown from a life of materialism represented in the south to a position of spirit represented in the north. The key to evolving further is, again, movement. Because she has gone from the south looking north for the spirit, she must now move from the north looking south to manifest substance. After manifesting substance, she must then travel back north to manifest spirit, and so on. This book describes my lessons of transit and my meeting with the Sisterhood of the Shields in pursuit of knowledge and the adventure of the spirit. I again travel north to meet my teachers Agnes Whistling Elk and Ruby Plenty Chiefs in northern Manitoba, Canada. My experiences took me to the center of the sacred spiral in order to reclaim my original female nature, the real woman within. There are no excuses for anything, Agnes once told me. You change things or you don't. Excuses rob you of power and induce apathy. I sometimes see women who have been cheated out of their spiritual heritage just as they have been cheated out of their minds and bodies. I, for one, struggle against the left. LVA, Red Deal, Alberta, Canada, August 1984. Chapter 1. Dream Journey to the North. I always return to the mystery, and I think there's nothing in the world but the mystery. Kenneth Patchen. I always return to this place. The aurora borealis striked across the cloudless sky. Great flashes of green and purple pulsated in sword-like patterns. A noiseless celebration of moving color above the stark, frozen tundra that stretched endlessly before us. The runners of dog sled sliced through the virgin snow, making an odd, whirring sound. The 10 huskies pulling our sled had lapsed into silent running. The dogs had barked and jowled joyously earlier in the day, but now they were tired. Although I had been over this trail many times earlier in the year, if Ruby Plenty Chief's apprentice, July, a young Cree woman, had not been with me now, I would have been completely lost. The wind cut out of the north, leaving my face frozen and numb, and snow crystals brushed against my cheeks. I turned away from the persistent gale. The snow had formed a hard, white rim on the fur edging my parka hood. Even in the afternoon glow, the sleeping trees sticking out at angles from the snow drifts looked gray and bleak, barely throwing shadows. Occasionally, a larger tree trunk would reflect the red in the sky, pulsating for a moment with an eerie dance of hidden leaf borrowed from another season, and then quickly flashbacks into a gray anonymity. July and I had each been pushing behind the sled with one foot and riding on a runner with the other. For July, this was a way of life. For me, it was a tremendous effort. As we hurtled forward over the snow, the sled began to jerk and drag. Sensing the exhaustion of the dogs, July called the team to a halt. We squatted down beneath a rise of snow, huddling together for warmth. July got out a can of sterno and lit it with a lighter. We waved our mittened hands over the flame. Then July took her sheath knife and sliced off a bite from a frozen fish. She handed a large morsel to me. I gnawed on the first nourishment I had had in hours, ignoring the odd taste and texture, thankful for the food and rest. July squinted at the sky, assessing our position. Ominous storm clouds were gathering in the distance. July turned to me, grinning impishly. Her 23-year-old brown face was beautiful. She said, "You picked a fine time to travel north." She gestured toward the black cathedral of clouds moving in our direction. "Why didn't you wait until the spring, Thaw?" I felt the blush further reddening my already windburned cheeks. I knew I had chosen a particularly inclement season to come to Canada, but I had to, I said. "Tell me, why?" July said, slouching down in her huge sealskin parka until only her nose and eyes were visible. The dogs, still panting, had bunched together against the icy cold. Numbing gusts of wind ruffled their gray and white neck fur. I changed position. The fur of my parka touched the fur on July's. My voice had an odd resonance when I spoke. A week ago, I was sitting in a beautiful garden in Santa Barbara having tea with a friend of mine named Sirena. It was a warm as a summer day. July's eyes grew wide. You mean you left warm weather to come here? A burst of wind hit me and it was so cold I could hardly form words. I had to see Agnes, I mumbled. July giggled. I think you've been seeing too many Indians. We both had a shivering laugh. Listen to what happened, I said. Each time I reached for my teacup, a very large monarch butterfly landed on it. At first, I was annoyed. It wasn't going to let me drink my tea. Then what happened? July asked. The butterfly kept jumping at me. It landed on my nose and forehead. Sirena shrieked with laughter. Suddenly, it flew away to the north. I pointed at it, and it came back and landed on my finger. It was so beautiful as it clung to me, its large reddish orange and black wings folding and unfolding. Its tiny legs seemed to be pulling at me. We stared at each other a long time. Then it flew away due north and disappeared out of sight. There aren't any monarch butterflies in the winter, July said. I know, and I don't think it will fly north at this time of year. That's exactly why I had to find out about it. Do you think it was a medicine sign? I certainly do. You don't think I'd come 2,500 miles to this deep freeze for anything else? July shrugged. I understand. I wish I'd get a little signal from power telling me to go down to Florida. We had a hearty laugh and hugged. July got up and cried, "Gee, gee," to the dogs, and we were quickly on our way again. The dogs had regained their spirit and ran diligently ahead of us. It was faster snow because the sun was dropping, which created a mogul of icy snow that glittered like dark crystals in the fading light. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the wind suddenly died, and a vast stillness pervaded the white plateau. I became increasingly anxious that nightfall would overtake us before we reached Agnes Whistling Elk's cabin. I was about to express my concern to July when we both saw a tendril of smoke in the distance. Snaking up into the twilight, we elbowed each other and hooted through our chapped lips. My cheeks were too cold to smile. As we approached, the cabin became more distinguishable. It looked like a great pointed snowdrift. We spent the next half hour digging in and, in the semi-darkness, fed the hungry dogs slabs of frozen moose meat. We stowed the sled and harness and stacked the dogs for the sub-zero night. We were in a state of exhaustion and barely uttered a sound. As we entered the cabin, stamping our icy boots and brushing the snow off our parkas, I realized that Agnes had left the fire going in her stove, but she was not at home. With stiff fingers, I lit a lantern, and then sat down on a wooden chair in front of the stove. My breath was still steaming because of the coldness, and my cheeks felt wet as they began to thaw. I threw some logs in the stove. Inside the cabin, the windows turned blind eyes to the dark wilderness outside. The wind howled, and the old cabin logs creaked and growled. I was joined by July. We sat there numbly, our outstretched hands thrust into the warmth. Neither of us spoke. The radiant heat was wonderfully reviving. I gazed at the flames through the open iron door, and into the glowing belly of the stove. I became aware of a perpendicular shadow on my right against the log wall. With the quickening flames, the shadow swelled and quivered. When I found the source of this curiosity, I had a brief moment of confusion. "July," I said, alarmed. "That's Red Dog's walking stick, isn't it?" "Yes, it is," she said in a halting voice. "I can't look at it. It scares me." "What is it doing here?" "Who knows?" July said, averting her eyes. She was shaking with fear. "I can't help it," she apologized. "He may be near." For a moment, I thought about Red Dog, the sorcerer, a man who had put my life in danger many times. Years ago, he had tried to kill me with that very walking stick. We had been in a life and death struggle over the stolen marriage basket. Because of my apprenticeship to Agnes Whistling Elk and the skillful training I received from her, I had been able to stock and return the marriage basket to Agnes, its rightful owner. Now, as always when I ventured into the far north, there was never a moment that I did not fear the sudden appearance of Red Dog back into my life. I knew he would not rest until he saw me stripped of my power. "You're thinking about Red Dog, aren't you?" July asked, interrupting the flow of my thoughts. Yes, I am. July touched my hands, her own hand trembling. It's okay, July, I said. Let's take a closer look. As I approached the walking stick, I felt a quiver run up my spine. I realized it was not Red Dog's walking stick after all, but only a piece of kindling wood. Was this just a projection of my own fears? Or perhaps Red Dog had been responsible for the illusion. Perhaps he had just wanted to remind us of his presence. I think the chill was getting to us, I said to July. It's only kindling. I picked it up and handed it to her. She examined it, and then suddenly pitched it into the flames, dusting her hands. That's what I think of Red Dog, she said. I looked around and noticed how cozy and different the cabin seemed. A Hudson Bay blanket was draped over the north window, and several caribou hides lay on the bed. Wads of paper had been stuffed in various holes in the walls. The familiar dried herbs and jerky still hung from the rafters. Agnes' medicine shield still hung above her dresser, and many red, black, and gray Indian rugs from the south covered the plank floors. As I moved around, I became very aware of the noise I made. The snow insulated the cabin and intensified each sound. I had spent so many happy hours sitting here with Agnes. Never had I arrived that she had not been here with a greeting. And she had always had an interesting story or anecdote to hold my interest as we whiled away the long evenings. There was no way for me to ever contact her. She just somehow always knew I was coming. Her absence affected me deeply. I missed her and was confused about what to do. I had never ventured here in the depths of winter, and I began to wonder if I had made a mistake. I had had such a strong instinct to come, but it was a heavy winter, and everyone, my mother, my daughter, July's family, had warned me against attempting the journey. Lynn! Here, look! July had found a note written on the brown paper sock on the sink. Excitedly, I held the note by the light of the lantern. It said, "Welcome," and that Agnes had been called away on an emergency to Churchill. Churchill? That's so far from here. When could she possibly be coming back? I was alarmed. Look at what else she says, July said, pointing to the note. It said that Agnes had known of my coming and had left me a precious gift in the butterfly tree out in the horse pasture. Remember that the flight is forever. Enjoy it, and I will return when I can. In spirit, Agnes. July and I awoke at first light in the morning. The windows were opaque with frost and snow. We made a couple of dashes at the stove, loading it with wood, and then quickly crawled back in our sleeping bags. We got dressed inside them and waited for the cabin to warm up before getting out. July went out to tend to the dogs, and I started melting snow for water, keeping the fire well stoked. Over tea and caribou jerky, I read and reread the note that Agnes had left for me. Anticipation was building inside me. Come on, July, I want to see what Agnes has for me at the tree. I wonder why she left it there. It must be big. July smiled and gulped her tea. It wasn't long before we buckled on our snowshoes and were tramping across the snowdrifts over to the horse pasture. Our footsteps left gray Sasquatch tracks in the snow. The sun was shining and the snow dazzled our eyes. I was amazed at how different the area looked. What had been a lush pasture teeming with insects, birds, and animals was now deserted. The terrain was as white as far as the eye could see. We had walked for about 15 minutes when the butterfly tree first came into view. It struck me as curiosity how different it was now from the last time I had seen it. I had been walking along with Agnes when I had looked up from our conversation. The sight of the tree had staggered me. The limbs were entirely covered with monarch butterflies. The entire tree seemed to expand and contract with their scintillating movements. There were so many of them that they obscured even the largest branches from view. It was the first time I had ever seen this amazing phenomenon. I had wanted to stay there looking at the butterflies, but Agnes had insisted that we leave at once. Agnes had said that the tree was a trickster tree, and that it wanted to steal a certain part of my body. When I had told her I thought she was trying to scare me, she had become angry and insisted one of the branches would take my leg at any moment, and that I would look pretty strange hopping back to the cabin on one leg. I had laughed at her, but as I was laughing, I had felt a tickling sensation curse up my right leg. Agnes had refused to speak about it, the butterfly tree, ever again. But first, she had extracted a promise, which I readily gave, that I would never look at the butterfly tree for more than a few minutes without her being present. I had managed to avoid the tree entirely for the rest of my stay. Looking at the tree now, as July and I made our way across the snowfield, it seemed odd that the leafless old giant had so frightened me. But then, so many strange things had occurred in this north country that defied explanation. My stomach began to tighten. July, I don't see anything. There was no visible object waiting for me in the branches of the tree. 10 feet from the tree, I began to tremble and become more alert. I saw a gaping hole in the trunk of the tree at about shoulder height. We walked around the tree several times, kicking at the snow in the chance that the gift had been buried. Maybe Agnes hid it, July said. She probably put it inside the trunk. You think I should look? July nodded her head at the hole. Where else could it be? Both of us began kicking snow in a mound to use as pedestal. July scooped with her snowshoe, using it as a sort of shovel. We were both panting, but were able to build a mound a couple of feet high. Why would Agnes put anything way out here in the pasture? Why didn't she just leave it in the cabin? I asked. Who knows why Agnes does anything? July asked rhetorically. We both stepped back and again examined the tree. The bark was encrusted with ice and caught dreamlike flickerings of color from the sunlight. I guess you're right, July. It must be inside the trunk, unless Agnes forgot to bring it here. Agnes never forgets anything, July said. You're right. My gift is here somewhere. I stepped up on the packed snow mound as gracefully as I could, and put my mittened fist into the hole until my arm disappeared up to my elbow. My heart was racing. I felt like a shed bear looking for honey. Tentatively, I felt around inside. The interior of the tree felt rough and seemed to travel down at an abnormal angle. I fumbled around, spaced, and then more tree. Nothing. I looked at July and shrugged my shoulders. Try with your other arm, July said. I explored inside the tree trunk again, with no more luck than the first time. Let's pack more snow and see if you can stick your head down inside and take a look, July suggested. I think it's too dark to see anything, I said. What do you suppose is there? I don't know, July chuckled. Maybe it is a bag of gold. Never can tell anything for sure with Agnes, I said, nearly sleeping as I got down from the mount. Okay, let's build this thing higher. I'm going to get what's in there if it takes all day. We both used our snowshoes as digging tools and mounted the snow higher until it was halfway up the trunk to the first branches. Now, I was reticent to try again. My stomach tightened even more, but with a flap of my elbows and a few slippery footholds, I scaled the mound and approached the hole from this new vantage point. As I put my mittened hands on either side of the cavity to balance myself, I noticed with surprise that there were worn places at the edges. I scraped the snow away. I wonder how old this tree is, July. Very old, she answered. It's a great-grandmother tree. She must have many children. The worn places at the edges seemed to be henholes, as if many hens had been there before me. It reminded me of old bones when I touched it, as if the flesh had been stripped away by the long winter, leaving only the essential armature of its body. Look, July, at how worn this wood is. July got on the mount with me. We both traced the worn smooth wood with our mittens. It looks like this hole has been used for something, July said, shaking her head in wonder. Look inside, I said. Not me, July said. You look. She slid off the mount. I didn't know why I was getting so nervous. This was only an old tree with a big hole in it. I brushed the fur on my hood back from my face and got in a more comfortable position. Slowly, I put my head inside the hole. The opening was shaped in such a way that I could barely fit. When I entered the space, I had to push slightly, and the edge of the hole rested against my fur collar. There was a sudden tremulous vibration, and the mound of snow I was standing on seemed to drop slightly. "What's in there, Lynn? What is it?" I was about to answer July, but all at once I was gone. I felt a weightlessness as if my body had disappeared. A vacuous darkness was moving toward me, or I was being sucked into it. Then I began to make out a flower-like shower of sparks. They were flying off in all directions from a certain point. I realized I was being propelled by some inward force into this beautiful concentric pattern. My thoughts seemed to retard this process, so I made my mind a blank. The sparks became a great pinwheel that quickly swallowed me. I was no longer conscious of July or the tree. The whole of my earthly life seemed premature. All of time had collapsed and become one-dimensional, a filmy non-substance that I was struggling to fracture and go beyond. I heard a female voice speaking softly. "This is the spirit house of butterflies." The words seemed to enfold me and pull me even further, like a swimmer on a wave. The fiery point vanished. Standing in a swirling mist was the most beautiful Indian woman. Her long black hair hung down to her moccasins. She was wearing a fringed, beaded doeskin, dressed, and was holding a large, sword-like crystal in her left hand. "Who are you?" I heard myself ask. "I am a butterfly woman." "You are on the threshold of the place where the butterflies come from. Why have you brought me here?" "We have drawn you here with our magic songs. You must first climb the butterfly tree to where I live, and then I will reward you." Suddenly she was gone, and in her place was the butterfly tree as I had first seen it, its trunk on my feet and its branches obscured by countless fluttering butterflies. It towered into the heavens. "Climb the tree to the nest at the top," her faint voice called from the distance. I was mesmerized by the beauty before me. I looked up into the tree branches and caught a glimpse of shimmering black and orange satin and tiny sheets of velvety red turning to peacock blue. The tree had taken on another life, a release into its own static dream, its shape being carried away of fluttering wings. For a moment, I was overjoyed. As I struggled up the tree trunk to the first branch, my being seemed to be weighted down by 100-pound sacks of sand. The butterflies ignored me. I knew I would never make it to the top. I was so exhausted when I got to the lowest branch that I perched there, leaning against the trunk, and started to fall asleep. A whirring sound startled me awake, and a butterfly just like the one I seen in Santa Barbara flew right between my eyes, then up to the next branch. It was frantic, like a dog needing help, and urged me on. I mustered all the will I had and climbed one more branch as if I were being pulled by an invisible cord. I seemed to be dragging a spirit form of my physical body. It was so heavy it felt like I was hauling a buffalo up, branch by branch. At the fourth branch, the butterflies made a droning sound as if they were trying to cloud my senses and put me to sleep. The little butterfly flew around me, taunting me, attempting to goad me onward. But it couldn't move. As I started to fall asleep, I almost lost my balance, and a great thunderclap sounded in my ears. It scared me so that I leaped to the next branch, and then another and another. Each branch had its own demons. The butterflies suddenly transformed themselves into a nameless monsters, and then became rearing white stallions. Then they were old hags, and then devouring mothers. Then the butterflies held up their polished wings as if they were so many mirrors. As I peered into them, I saw a grotesque reflection, the dark side of myself. It was as if the butterflies were trying to terrify me into losing my balance. Toward the top, the little butterfly flew right into a wall of flames created by other butterflies rubbing their tiny legs together. He came out on the other side of the flaming branch, unscathed, and transformed for a moment into a rearing white stallion. If I hadn't been for that courageous little fellow, I would have never have ventured through the blue hot flames. But I followed and made it to the top, where a huge nest made out of mud and bizarre pieces of wood was perched. I climbed over the edge into the nest. It was as if I were at the top of the world. There stood the beautiful butterfly woman beside a smooth river stone with a hollow place in the top. "The springs of magic and wet places of power are running dry," she said. "Come drink of this clean water from this spring." A jet of water spouted up from the smooth stone, and I cupped my hands and drank gratefully. The butterfly landed on the woman's head, and her long black hair turned into a fluttering mass of velvety reddish, orange, and black butterflies. She was so luminescent and breathtaking that I just sat at her feet. "Why was I sent here?" "You have been sent here that you may die by my hand." She reached out her fingers, and I felt a pulling sensation. Then I saw first my left arm float out into space, then my right. "These bones that are your body represent the stars. Your head is the moon, and your heart is the sun." She dismembered my body, each part floating away, until only my spirit remained, looking at this scene. I felt no pain and no fear. Somehow I knew this was supposed to be. Then she brought the pieces of my body back down out of the sky and took crystals from the spring beside her. I watched her open places in my body and insert crystals in my heart, my head all over. Then she sewed me back together, my limbs hanging like those on a rag doll. She picked up a pair of scissors and cut my hair like a china doll's, straight across the bottom and straight bangs just above my eyebrows. "This cut represents the four corners," she said, "the powers of the four directions." She traced my fingers with hers over the corners, created at the end of the bangs and the front of the longer hair on the sides. "In the spirit world, you will be seen with this haircut from now on. Your hair is the extension of your spirit. It is your sacred headdress and tells of your medicine journey with the butterfly woman. Now we can talk. We can talk of two ways of seeing." I looked at her wide-eyed, and tears rolled down my cheeks. "Do I have to go back down the tree?" "Its beauty is deceiving." "Yes, beauty always has another side. If you look at something carefully, as a medicine woman, you will always be able to see the dark side too. One cannot exist without the other, and yet your people choose never to look into the shadows. They fear the double. On your climb up the tree, what did you see? I saw horrible things, monsters, and fires. When I looked into the mirrors, I saw an ugly, hideous reflection of myself. It wasn't really me, was it?" "Yes, it was. But you were brave. You looked at it and chose to leap through it. Later you will realize what a great lesson that was for you. Right now, it is good enough that you understand that it is what you choose not to observe in your life that controls your life. That is your lesson here. Do you understand me?" "I think so." If you had looked away from your own reflection, no matter how horrible, you would have fallen from the butterfly tree forever. You would have fallen back into endless sleep. I could not have reached you there. That would have been your tragedy. When men and women fall away from their own vision of sacredness, their culture falls away into sleep with them. Sacred vision contains the balance of light and dark. Here, it's like this. She took magnetic lodestones and put them together. First, the two positive ends, then the two negative ends, and we watched them repel each other. Then, she stuck the positive and negative together, and they held in union. The positive and negative need each other for creation, for the tourbillon to take place. What is a tourbillon? It's like a whirlwind of fire, the source, the primal creation. As she spoke, she raised her hands, and a great fiery spiral rose up between us. We watched it spin for several minutes. She came over and placed her hands on either side of my head. "Look, Lynn, now. Look through the crystals in your eyes and see the tourbillon." I felt a subtle shift inside me, and I began to look differently at the fiery spiral. I witnessed the elements that made up the fire. They appeared to be male and female energy particles, positive and negative. The female would perform an imploding and the male would explode. Then the male would implode and the female would explode, pushing and pulling the energy forms in a whirling dance. Everything begins with a circle of motion. Without positive and negative poles, there would be no movement, no creation, she said. Take your hands from my head. The fire slowly receded, spinning into the ground. Without the dark side, your beauty would not exist. Don't be afraid to look at both sides. You need them both. You must honor all existence as part of the Great Spirit. I watched her sitting serenely, surrounded by butterflies. And brooding ache came over me. What's the matter? She asked. Will I ever see you again? It's been such an ordeal to get here. I feel such peace here. I would so like to stay and learn from you. I wanted to cry. You have already died to who you were. Everything is the same and nothing is the same. Now you truly see. Look at the crystals in your heart. Go ahead. Look at me and see your answer for yourself. Suddenly, I saw myself as a little girl pleading with my mother not to leave me. I began to sob. In a flash, I relived my childhood and saw my fears of being grown up. Think of your shields, Lynn. Think of your woman and man shields. And then your little girl and little boy shields. Think of how they represent all the selves within you. I saw my shields set out in a circle around me. I sat in my little girl's shield, crying in the south on the medicine wheel. I stopped crying and moved to the east to my little boy's shield. Immediately, I felt like throwing an angry tantrum at my inability to control the situation. Then I felt better. Now go to your woman's shield in the west, she directed. A new confidence came over me, and I realized that power and wisdom I was feeling now moved to your man's shield in the north. It was there. I saw my problem. My sense of responsibility faltered. I wanted to blame it on somebody else, but I didn't. Even now what it was or whom to blame but myself. You have climbed the butterfly tree, Lynn. Your position of responsibility in the world has now begun. Do you see? I paused for a long moment, not wanting to see. I started to shift back to my little girl's shield, tears welling up in my eyes. Then I saw what was happening. I may never see the butterfly woman again. The gift had been given, and it was up to me to use it. The butterfly is beautiful only for its season. Like a warrioress, she touches the world briefly with her iridescent wings and then becomes transformed into another form of life. As will you. She held her palms over my spirit shape and ran them up and down about an inch from me. Humming under her breath, she went to the butterfly tree. She took 6 cocoons from it, placing many tiny crystals from the spring inside of them, and turned them into rattles. She tied them into a 6-foot-long stick from the tree and stuck it in the ground. She sang to me as she related to the spirit of the tree to help me of my wounds where the crystal had been placed. You are the spirit woman of words. I am mending you, curing what hurts you. I look in the crystals. I will cure you. I sew you up. I hold Mother Bear here. I help you fight. Great Spirit, thank you for being here. Her words were simple, but her music was stunningly complex, celestially beautiful. As she sang, she continued to run her hands over my spirit shape, and the rattles, the crystals-filled cocoons, agitated up and down the stick without her touching them. When the cocoons would stop moving, she would direct her attention, her healing energy, to that part of my body where her hands were. This continued, and she repeated the song over and over until she seemed satisfied. Finally, she took my hands and led me to the tree. The little butterfly appeared and flew around my head. She seemed happy, as if I were taking him out for a walk. I had to laugh. He seemed filled with anticipation. He is my ally, she said, smiling at him. When you see him at times in your life, remember me and know that I am dreaming you and sending you power. Take this branch from the tree and use it to play your drum. Remember, the teaching in the butterfly tree, and above all, know that the flight is forever. And she was gone. I couldn't help but cry as I crawled over the rim of the nest and stepped on the top branch of the tree. She was so wonderful, and I was so afraid of the tree. It wanted to eat me. The butterfly flew down ahead of me as I descended. Again, I felt the heavy sensation, although not as badly as before. At every branch, there was some terror to face. I went through the fire more easily, and the mirror images in the shining butterfly wings seemed like mere caricatures of the former images. I got to the second branch from the bottom, and I heard the far-off sound of July's voice saying, "Lynn, come on! Do you see anything?" I saw the last branch was being chewed away by hundreds of butterflies. The little butterfly was flying up and down as if to say, "Hurry, hurry." My body weighed hundreds of pounds, and I could barely move. I was so tired and sleepy that I began to dream a beautiful dream about a handsome warrior. But then I struggled with all of my will and reached the lowest branch, leaving him behind. I fell the rest of the way down, and the next thing I knew, I was pulling my head out of the hole. I slipped and then slid off the pile of snow on my back, still clutching the branch. July was laughing at me and helped pull me to my feet. "Is that all Agnes left you? An old stick?" Thank you guys so very much for tuning in with me. And I'm new at this, and I'll get better by the second. By the time I keep doing this, I'll keep on getting better. And for you guys tuning in, I'm so grateful. And just remember, it's easy to wake up. The hard part is to stay woke. Keep at it, my warriors.